Very good. Thank you very much. So with that, we're going to wrap up the webinar and move into a question and answer. And then I'll put up contact information and some additional resource links. I'd also like to thank my new friends in South Africa and the wildlife there and the Videa in Germany. So you have a Q&A box. Please go either at the top of your screen or the bottom of your screen, and you can go ahead and type in the questions, and we will go through and spend some time answering them.
I think the Hardy Dars has got a lot of questions on this side.
You're right. The Hardy Dars in Cape Town have got a lot of questions sitting on the vineyards. It was a really fascinating presentation. And what was really interesting is standing back as someone who's sort of seeing this thing in the context of the total picture and asking some questions. So the key element I take out of this, and you alluded to it, is communication is important and tracking of work is important. That's a given. I don't think there's anything else that people can say. When you're doing a project, you're doing these big projects, you have to communicate and you have to find a way of managing and tracking the projects. However, one of the questions that was asked was, James, on your slide 14, when you talk about the most important 5 big ideas, and David, on your slide 24, where you talk about the 3 elements of shared goals, one of them is missing people. And David, I know yours is, but James, yours isn't. Where do you put the people aspect into that slide? Because, you know, without people, you battle. Without people, you cannot really do anything. Or is it implicitly underlined in all of those 5 big ideas you're talking about?
For me, I would say it's underlying everything. It's implicitly in there. You make a good point. Maybe we could put that in the middle of the graphic. At the end of the day, it is all about people getting the work done.
And that was one of the questions I was asked is, you know, people are everything, people do everything, people that make things happen. So maybe in the center, people, systems and tools or whatever. But anyway, okay. So that was one of the questions asked. The second question asked was, and James, you made the comment, team building takes 18 to 20 months. And the comment was, why does team building traditionally take so long? Why is that not done in a shorter period of time? Why do people take so long to bond and get together and align with each other and just become partners in this whole business thing? Is there a specific reason in your industry?
I wish I knew. It would. So I think it's not, it's a little more complicated. I didn't go deep into it. When I say to build a team, it's not really, you know, people feel like they're collaborating relatively quickly. When I say 14 to 18 months, that seems to be a general theme across our larger projects of when it feels like the team is really firing on all cylinders. So they're doing the plus deltas on their own. They're planning their work. The reliability has gone up. The decision making is relatively quick, and we're not going back and revisiting decisions. When problems come up, the team doesn't need to be encouraged to what we call swarm, to call a meeting and get together and kind of figure out what the problem is and come up with a solution. It has a life of its own. So what I've found is about 14 months is as fast as I've been able to get a team made up of 8 or 10 different companies to have a mind of its own, as if it's its own living thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, And what is the experience been with David and Frick and Davida? Do you find that also sort of a similar time frame? And if so, maybe there's an opportunity here for someone to go and do some research or create some innovative product that can reduce that cycle.
If I try to make the first, so I think I've seen both situations. First of all, 14, 18 months, of course, it depends on the overall duration of a project. In many of the projects that I've been dealing with, that's the whole duration of the project. So nobody can afford to have that time also just for the team alignment. Now the question is, how do you make it faster? I think you must create a sense of urgency. You, as the project director, must create the first in the first months, and let me just give a number. Maybe in the first 10% of the overall development time, you must set what is important and what type of team do you expect to have. So you must role model, you must communicate, you must make sure that the people are aligned, make sure that all the skills are on board. So the clock at that period, when you start putting the people together, must turn very quickly. I can imagine it's a similar story when you do improvement projects in an existing operation. If it takes 2-3 months to implement something new, you must, from the very first beginning, create an alignment, have the right people on board, and make sure that these are working very effectively together. I think it's the role, first of all, of the project director to speed it up.
I want to agree with Davida. Your leadership, your project sponsor, as well as the project director, has got a massive influence. What I find difficult is that a lot of project sponsors and project directors see what, and I'm using the word team building loosely, see team building and team development as a waste of time because they're very task driven. But what they don't realize is the more time you invest upfront in team development, and as I said before, around the planning of the project, the quicker it happens. The longer you wait and less time you spend, the longer it takes. So that upfront planning is really important in getting the right people involved and a participative process at that stage.
Let me at the last say here, we must all say something. When we work with Fluor, which is one of the big engineering contractors we work to, they really try to get the project into what they call a rhythm, so that things happen. There's a certain, rhythm as, things are supposed to happen, and meetings and decisions and all these things. And this very much support what James has said around getting the people to do the things automatically and so on. They're not unsure, they know what they can decide on and all of those things. So you really must work on that and make sure you get into that rhythm type of thing. It's almost like an army type of thing that happens, in the army, you do this. A big problem I have seen often is that people say, I formed a team. So you say, you on this project team now. Now they expect things must happen. The thing that happens immediately after that is you're in the storming phase. So everybody is trying to protect his interests. He only understands his viewpoint. There are lots of arguments and discussions, and not to sort of make the project happen badly, is because people are not aligned, people have different viewpoints and so forth. And if you do not focus, the leaders do not focus on getting all the things done that we spoke about before, the team gets stuck in the storming phase. And I've seen that on many projects. People get unhappy, there's emotional, sort of cloud bursts or whatever you want to call it, and the whole team gets very emotional and very difficult to get out of that sequence. We had projects where it went so bad that we had psychological type of people come in, and typically people like Davida and so on, who sits down with the team and we try and break that sequence of, and get people out of this storming, argumentative phase. You have to really work on that very hard, and I think Davide has said it also, and get the people into the norming and performing stage. It doesn't happen by itself.
Okay, guys, we're going to have to move on because we're running out of time. But a quick comment from my side. We talk about people, standards, systems, etc. They're important, but I don't see anywhere that there's an element that allows for some creativity and innovation, because without that being sort of thrust into the spotlight, it sort of loses its attention. So it's just a comment from our side. On the roles and responsibilities side, slide 28, David, I like the fact that you guys are escalating criteria to ensure a quick and efficient decision, because I think that's a flaw in most projects. So that's a really good build. Wellness issues on projects, I personally think it's a forgotten skill and it needs to become more and more entrenched in projects. And then one or two other ones, Davida, not David, Davida. This whole issue about personal wellness and family wellness and so on and so forth, how much does that become of a legal issue from a company perspective because you're interfering in family life, if I can call it that, whereas they have their right to privacy, and yet the company requires them to be at a certain standard, if I can call it that.
There's two things,
What
Kevin.
is the legal issue?
The surveys are typically anonymous, first of all. And when they're not anonymous, the people actually give you permission to follow up. I, for instance, did some work. It was now not on projects, it was on operations in the mines, where we did wellness surveys on underground miners in order to identify safety risks, because some of those people are really in their personal wellness is so bad that they safety risk underground. And in that case, they actually gave us permission. So they freely participated. But in most cases on projects I've seen, the surveys are anonymous. So when you've got, for instance, an EAP, an Employee Assistance Program, to participate in that is something people can choose to do. So we make it available, and if somebody uses it, it's because they want to and they feel they need it.
Yeah, that's a good answer. And Fred, then just slide number 36 on the roles and responsibilities. I wonder how many times when people are setting up projects, they communicate the roles and responsibilities back to functional managers, so that functional managers understand what it is expected of their people. What in your experience has either accredited or discredited this? Because I think a lot of the time people are so focused on the project, they're so focused on setting up the project team, they forget about the person's home office. And it almost becomes an afterthought. And then as an afterthought, the functional manager has to try and sort a lot of stuff out. What is your view on this whole thing? Because I noticed with intense, what's the right word? Intense, whatever, that you spoke about this. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe it's something we need to just discuss for the broader community.
Yeah, it's certainly a problem, and I experienced it personally when performance assessment time came, and the project manager gave me a good rating, but my functional boss says he has no idea what I've been doing, and he downrated my performance rating, and I was, you can think, not very impressed by that. So what we did later on is, when an individual person's key performance areas are agreed and so on, and I think Davide spoke about that, we actually, two people agreed those performance areas. The guy's functional boss said, this is what I expect from you. as a mechanical engineer, for example, you have to do this or this, you must go on this and this training. The project responsible guy, the engineering manager typically on the project, said, all right, this is what you are expected to do on the project. And the performance agreement for the year was a combined, almost like a matrix type of thing, where both parties' sort of objectives were embedded in this performance agreement of the guy. When it came to assessment time, he was assessed by both parties together. And I think that made it a lot easier to manage. And I think we sort of in that way, broke a lot of the tension between the two functions, if I can call it that.
Yeah, I think the only comment that I think the guy who read the question was, it's something to think about. Don't forget about it. Don't always think about it in one dimension. It's 2 and 3 dimensions. And it's very, very important when it comes to people. And
Yeah,
so I think
sorry, I was saying that you always, when you're in a project, you work in a matrix organization. While if you're on a operations job, you work for the operations manager in a way, which I found was an easier situation sometimes. It always depends on what the organization structure of the company is.
Yeah. And then I think the only final comment I have is, fantastic, guys, well done. I just want to comment that those guys who have joined us, slide 39, when you look at so many meetings, you just need to remember this was a huge project. It's not your normal run-of-the-mill kind of project, so you would not ordinarily have all these meetings. It's a subset of what you see on that slide, but just be aware, when you do get into these big projects, you need to be aware of this communication issue. Okay, and I think that's it from our side.
Well, thank you very much. So this brings us to the conclusion of the webinar series. Again, I would like to say thank you to my co-panelists as well as all of you who have joined us. Thank you. It's really been a pleasure, and I've personally learned a lot as well. I
can just underline this. I think it has been also for us an important learning, even if we think we know a bit of this matter, but I think just exchanging different experiences and also exchanging different industries, it's really worth of value and spending a few hours together. I hope our participants also enjoyed as well, and yeah, looking forward to the next series.